Video for the digestive system.
Moving along, let's talk about the intestine super duper fast. Your small intestine has 3 sections. It's a long muscular tube. Chemical digestion is going to complete here, and most of the absorption is going to happen here. 90% of it is going to happen here. There's 3 segments: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. The duodenum is the first part right here that kind of triggers all the stuff that's happening, about 25 centimeters long. Not a whole lot of absorption happens here. Mostly mixing. It's the mixing bowl of the intestines, where some of that segmentation that we mentioned earlier takes place. Then we've got the jejunum right here, which is this purple part. Blah, 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 blah. It's going to go to about there. That's the middle segment, about 2.5 meters long. This is where the bulk of the chemical digestion and absorption is going to take place. Then after that, the longest section right here is the ileum, which is all of this stuff right here, and it's going to eventually end right about there-ish. And it is responsible for any sort of absorption that hasn't happened already in the jejunum, basically. And then that's going to end at the ileocecal valve, which is going to connect the small intestine to the large intestine, which we'll talk about here in just a second. And so the small intestine, what's interesting about the small intestine is it has all of these folds. And within the folds, we have these little things called villi. Schoolhouse Rock has a really good explanation of this whole phenomenon, so I recommend going back and looking for it. These are permanent, not like the rugae in the stomach. They permanently stay folded. And here's a picture of what the villi look like, and there's a lot of vascular tissue going on in here like that to allow for that. This is where the actual absorption takes place at those cells. You've got goblet cells producing mucus, help move things along and stuff like that. You've got, all of these are going to form what's called a brush border that is important as far as stimulating absorption of nutrients and stuff like that. So you've got these submucosal glands that produce a lot of mucus to the chyme to help protect the epithelium, to let those buffers from the pancreas come in and neutralize all that stuff. There's also a lot of bicarbonate ions to help raise that pH there. So that's kind of important to sort of help moisten things along. So the small intestine, physiologically, you produce about 1.8 liters of intestinal juice. That's a considerable amount of stuff entering the lumen. Now, we use that word lumen a bunch of times. That's just the opening. Basically, that's the space where the food goes and stuff like that. And so intestinal juice moistens the chyme, assists in buffering the acids, and keeps the digestive enzymes and products in solution so they can keep doing what they're supposed to be doing and stuff like that. Let's see, the mucosa of the small intestine, those are that's that inner layer, right? Produces very few enzymes. There's 2 main ones. You've got the brush border enzymes, which are membrane proteins on the microvilli, and they help break down things that come in contact with the brush border. And enteropeptidase is a specific type of brush border enzyme that activates one of the pancreatic proenzymes, trypsinogen, which helps break down proteins. Let's see, what do we got? So now we're talking about absorption. Remember, we said the bulk of the absorption in the body happens in the small intestine. The mucosa actually moves to help increase contact and increase absorption as well. It also stirs and mixes the contents, locating local differences in the nutrient concentration. We're done with the small intestine. Let's go ahead and start rounding things out a little bit, move into the large intestine. So the large intestine is horseshoe shaped. You can kind of see here, kind of looks like a horseshoe, right? It extends from the end of the ileum here to the anus right there. It's inferior to the stomach, so it's actually below it. Your stomach sits right here. It's about a meter and a half long. Starting with the cecum, that's this part right here. Let me switch colors. So here's the cecum. Right there is an expandable pouch. It receives and stores materials arriving from the ileum and starts compaction. Basically, one of the things your large intestine does is like a trash compactor and just compacts everything so it's easier to get rid of it. Hanging off of that, this little dealy bob right there is the appendix. Teeny tiny little thing. A ton of lymphoid nodules. A lot of times people thought that there wasn't really much to it, but it turns out it is actually kind of useful, maybe with bacterial flora, the bacteria living in your large intestine, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Moving from there, you've got your colon, and you actually take the colon, you can divide it into 3 different parts, okay? It's very large diameter, very thin wall compared to the small intestine. They have these pouches you can kind of see right here. Like I said, you can divide it into 3 parts. You've got the ascending colon, which is this side right here, moving into the transverse colon, which is this part right here. And you can actually have the curves, the right colic and the left colic flexure. Those are the curves. Coming down, here's your descending colon because it's going down. Sigmoidal colon makes this sort of S shape right here. Moving into the rectum, which is one of the final storage areas of fecal material. Going into the rectum, it's the last 15 centimeters of the digestive tract. And you can divide it up. There is the anal canal, which is the last portion of the rectum and has small longitudinal folds, these little anal columns right here that you can see, leading us to the anus, which is the actual end point. That's basically the hole where the feces comes out. It's got 2 sphincters, the internal sphincter, which is this one right here, and the external sphincter, which is this one right here, to help close things off. The internal sphincter is involuntarily controlled. It's smooth muscle. You can't control it. The external sphincter, you can. So if you've ever had to go to the bathroom and you're like, no, I have to wait, so you're like trying to hold it in, you're actually exercising control on the external sphincter, not the internal one. Now, how it passes waste out is basically a sort of interplay between the two. As one relaxes, the other one contracts, and so on and so forth, to sort of help push things out of the way and stuff like that. Histology, so talking about the tissues of the large intestine. Let's see, no villi, no folds. We don't really have a whole lot of absorption happening here. We do have some water absorption, but that's about it. Lots of goblet cells. We're having some water coming back in the form of mucus to help push things along. You don't want to have a lot of that feces sitting in your colon. A lot of those toxins and bacteria can build up and people can start to get cancer and stuff like that. Let's see, moving on. Functions of the large intestine: absorption or reabsorption of water, a small amount of nutrients, bile salts, organic waste, vitamins and toxins produced by the bacteria, basically anything that hasn't been absorbed at this point. Compaction of intestinal contents into what we actually know as feces when it comes out, and then storing of the fecal material prior to defecation. Within your large intestine, you have the microbiome. Those are your bacteria, fungi, viruses that live on and in the human body. There's a ton of them that live inside of the intestine. They're super important. They help give us a lot of the vitamins, which are organic molecules that are important for coenzymes and factors and stuff like that. Bacterial colon make 3 of the vitamins that we have to have. So if we didn't have that bacteria, we wouldn't have those necessary vitamins. They also help break down organic waste. They break down peptides and feces to generate ammonia, which is soluble ammonium ions, indole and skatole. Those are what make feces smell like feces. Also, hydrogen sulfides, which is the rotten egg odor that you can sometimes get as well. It feeds on indigestible carbohydrates like cellulose. That produces flatus. That is intestinal gas. So if you have flatulence, you have an excess of intestinal gas, which means you are going to fart a lot, flatulate, if you will. And that builds up in the large intestine. Let's see, how are we doing? So we're doing the elimination of feces. We are doing good. We're wrapping things up. Bacteria, so it requires relaxation of the internal and the external sphincters. Reflexes open the internal sphincter, but you have to activate your somatic nervous system, that's the conscious nervous system, in order to consciously open the external sphincter. have to relax. Well, we don't have to talk about the nerves. Doesn't matter. Okay, so rounding things up, we want to talk about nutrients and digestion. Nutrients are things that your body needs to function. A balanced diet contains carbohydrates, lipids, yes, fats are important, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and water. Those are your main nutrients. So processing and absorption of nutrients, like we said, happens mostly in the small intestine. Digestion is going to break down the physical structure and then break mechanically and then chemically break them into component molecules. Then at that point, the molecules are released into the bloodstream that are also absorbed by cells and are broken down for ATP synthesis. Those are your carbohydrates, or they're used to synthesize carbs, proteins, and lipids, right? Let's see. Lots of enzymes go in here to do the chemical digestion. They're going to break those bonds of the larger molecules, your biomolecules, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, in a process known as hydrolysis. Hydro meaning water, lysis meaning to break. So it's going to take water, it's going to fit it into those big chains, make little pieces. Different enzymes are broken into different classes based on their substrates. The biomolecule they work on. Carbohydrases like amylase are going to break the bonds between sugars. Proteases are going to break the bonds between amino acids. Lipases are going to break the bonds between fatty acids. You've also got nucleases, which are going to break the bonds within nucleic acids. What do we got? Digestive enzymes are secreted by the salivary glands, the tongues, the stomach, and the pancreas. Also, we've got brush border enzymes, which break down digestive fragments even further. Talking about carbohydrates. I really like this diagram. It looks very nice. So, salivary amylase right here is going to break down complex carbohydrates into disaccharides and trisaccharides. Pancreatic alpha amylase is going to do the same thing. Brush border enzymes here in your, right here at this part is going to break those down further into lactase, maltase, and sucrose. So let me back up. So brush border enzymes, maltase is going to split bonds between maltose. Sucrase is going to break apart sucrose, which is two molecules put together, and lactase is going to hydrolyze lactose into its smaller components. And we kind of talked about those way at the very beginning. If you do not have enough lactase, you are lactose intolerant. You cannot digest lactose, which is too bad because milk is so tasty. Then after that, you've got facilitated diffusion and transport across the cell body of the intestines right there. Those are your monosaccharides. More facilitated diffusion into all of those capillaries that we showed in those microvilli, and then it's going to go away to wherever it needs to go throughout your body. Talking about lipids. So we've got lingual lipase. We've also got pancreatic lipase and bile salts. Not a whole lot is really going on here. We're going to take those complex fats and we're going to turn them into monoglycerides, fatty acids in micelles. Those are those little globules that had the little bile salts all the way around them. Those are going to have simple diffusion across the brush border into the cell body. Those are going to be monoglycerides and fatty acids, triglycerides and chylomicrons, and then those are going to be pushed out by exocytosis because they're kind of big. They can't just diffuse across the membrane into lacteals, and then those are delivered into the subclavian vein by the thoracic duct. So it's not just simple diffusion because they're just too big. Moving on to proteins. Proteins, like I said, are super complicated. Boatloads of proteins are going to be going in and messing with those. Pepsin is the very first one that is going to start breaking down proteins into polypeptides. Other proteins are going to break down those peptides based on the type of bonds they have in between them into short peptides and then amino acids. From there, it's going to hit that brush border with dipeptidases. Are going to further break those down into those amino acids. Those are going to be facilitated transport into the capillaries, in which case they go off into the bloodstream wherever they need to go. Nucleic acid digestion and absorption is going to take place. They're broken down into nucleotides, which are further broken down into the sugars, phosphates, and nitrogen bases by those brush border enzymes. And then they're going to be absorbed by active transport like endocytosis because they're too big. Water absorption is going to happen basically along a osmotic gradient as we move through the digestive tract. Here's water absorption and secretion. What's really kind of cool that I want to point out real quick is you take in a considerable amount of water here and here. We're at the 5,200. Got another 15 that's coming in. Got another 2 liters that come in right there. Got 2 liters right there. So we're up to 10 liters of fluid that have accumulated at this point each day. You're going to reabsorb into your bloodstream another 8 liters. Your colon's going to reabsorb 1.25 liters. And then you're going to lose 150 milliliters. That's practically nothing. That's like 8 ounces of water, basically. I think that's pretty cool. Let's see. Ion absorption. The ions, how they're absorbed is going to depend on what ion they are. So a lot of it you're going to be used to maintain homeostasis concentrations. And so we have to regulate those. Sodium uptake is going to depend on how much sodium is in the intestinal contents as far as how much you take up. That kind of makes sense. It's generally proportional to how much you have. Calcium ion absorption is going to be regulated by hormones, and it's going to involve active transport at the epithelial surface. Potassium ions increase concentration as the other ones leave, and then as the other ones leave, then the potassium will follow. Still going. Magnesium ion and other cations are going to be carried across by specific carrier proteins that are going to bring those across actively. Same thing with ion. Anions like chloride and iodine are going to be carrier mediated or by simple diffusions. Phosphate and sulfate are big, so they're going to be brought across by active transport. Vitamins, super important organic compounds that are needed in very small quantities. We've got water-soluble ones. They dissolve in water like vitamin C and vitamin B. Fat-soluble, they don't dissolve in water. This is where you can't just eat the entire bottle of Flintstone vitamins, even though they taste like candy. A, D, super important. Your skin helps synthesize that. You also take it in with food. Vitamin E and vitamin K. Your bacteria also help give you some of those. A couple more slides real quick. Age-related changes. So your stem cells starts to decline, so you're not able to repair damage very well. Your smooth muscle tone degreases, so it becomes less elastic. So accumulated damage to your digestive system becomes apparent. Your rate of cancer starts to increase, especially colon cancer. So dehydration, because your digestive system isn't as efficient, becomes more common, especially in the elderly. And then other changes also have direct or indirect effects on the digestive system. Lots of connections going on between the other systems. For example, your nervous system. There's a lot of direct nervous control. Same thing with endocrine system. Cardiovascular system, the transporting all those nutrients and waste out of here. And the lymphatic system, where a lot of your tissues and stuff, like the lipids, for example, are transported through lymphatic vessels. The digestive tract is also considered an endocrine organ because it produces a variety of hormones. We didn't really talk about those, but you can go back and look at the textbook if you want also. It also produces neurotransmitters to help regulate the nervous system as well. I like this slide. It basically goes into how all the other organ systems are connected directly to the digestive system and how they feed off of each other. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. If you have any questions after we go through this, I'm going to be back on. I'll do this live on Wednesday, so please join me then. Otherwise, send me an email, send me a remind message, that sort of thing. Drop your questions in the discussion board in Canvas, and I'll go through those, and I can address some questions as we go through like that. Hopefully this went a little bit better than the this morning's version. It's a little bit cleaner. Hopefully the model helped. Not a whole lot of opportunities to bust this thing out, so, I'll take what I can get. Everybody, have a good day, evening, morning, whatever it is you are doing when you see this, and I will talk at y'all later.